great show. You know the best part about my show? The audio. Welcome to the Phil McKee Show, where you'll find the perfect face for radio. If you've ever wondered how your thoughts sound, just unfiltered, well, just say them out loud. Try to just string them together, right? That's what free association is. Just put it together. Just speak. Don't worry about how you sound. Try to be communicable and understandable, but don't stress. Don't stress about how it's coming across. You know, I think there's a therapeutic value to just unilateral oratory, not extemporaneous perhaps, not speaking to anyone in particular, like me right now. And I'm not even really speaking to you, if you notice. I'm just speaking. I'm not speaking to anyone in particular. I'm just trying to, instead of just having my thoughts cascade into my working memory silently, I'm liberating them vocally. But it's not for you, right? So if you ever hear this and go, oh God, what's this guy doing again? How is he talking like this? Who's he talking to? I'm not talking to anyone, okay? You're just there. And that's okay. That's okay. To realize that something is not about you, that's a good thing. It's like the butterfly who's flapping his wings, just fluttering by you. He's not doing that for you. Sure, you see him, and with his little insect brain, he may be aware that you are seeing him. Probably will be aware that you're seeing him, depending on how you motion in his regard. But he doesn't really regard you as a validated audience member. You are not the point. You're just there. Not the point. You're simply there. Simply there. So when we do this kind of oratory, this extemporaneous, one-sided oratory, we actually will come out of that process not only incrementally more fluent, but perhaps more self-understood. There's many different ways in which we can introspect, many different ways that we can study ourselves. And in the common parlance associated with what is generally referred to as meditation, there's this idea and this perhaps not so implicit impetus to eliminate linguistic chatter. We don't necessarily want to be having this kind of automatic linguistic chatter happening. We're trying to silence it. We're trying to just be alinguistically. Now, is there value to that? Absolutely. Right? It's not good to just natter on linguistically, verbally, internally. But you could say the same thing about any kind of mental expression. We want to get away from being helpless to our general mental chatter. It's not always linguistic, right? A lot of our sensory motor interoceptions bubble over into language. That's really what it is. That's how I see it. I might be wrong. Language, if you're chattering away linguistically, it's because you're already chattering away sensory motorically, mentally. Images are just flashing into your head. Sounds are careening into your mind. Smells, tastes, emotions, fears, all these things are just nattering away and hamster wheeling away at your mind. So let's not get so focused on the linguistic component. If it's already bubbling over into language, you've already let it go too far. The language is an outflow of the more basic sensory motor aspects of our being. So you've got to wheel it back further. You need to stop the mental uncontrol, really. The mental uncontrol. How helpless are you to your thoughts? Can you control your thoughts? A lot of our unhappiness, I think, comes from simply not being able to control our mental experience. If you can't control your mental experience, then you will therefore have difficulty controlling your physical experience. You need to be able to control your mental landscape. It's not just thoughts. People say, oh, control your thoughts. It's the whole mental landscape. It needs to be cherished and protected. And so when we talk about things like meditation, where we're essentially trying in some forms of it to minimize the mental chatter, well, it follows from that. If you take it right back to the source, where you follow the money, you follow the thought, you follow the mentation, you go right back to the source and you ask yourself, how helpless am I to this sensory motor medium? Right? Our reward system is going to serve us up with associative mental imagery. And by imagery, I mean all forms of mental inception. But we'll say it like this. Your reward system is going to serve you up with different associative mental components, associative mental experiences, associative mental simulations. And these simulations are part of the hamster wheel of the different reward circuits that have formed in your mind. Whether against your will or by your own negligence or through your own volition, your reward system is going to be one of the engines of that mental chatter that happens as a kind of default within your mind. So if you can't control your mental landscape, it's probably because you're not very aware of your reward system. You're not especially conscious of the different associative mental experiences that your reward system is going to serve you up. So, cutting right through it, right? We talked about language, we talked about sensory motor aspects to our mental experience, and how when we really try to gain control of our mind, to bring peace to our mind, or to bring a greater understanding and perhaps therethrough peace, then we've got to get right to the source of it. And I think really one of those engines, like I said, is the reward system. Reward and deterrence. That's the key. What do you hope for? What are you afraid of? Tell me your hopes and your fears, and I will paint you your mental landscape. Your hopes and fears are both the canvas and the color of your mental landscape. For instance, this is a true story. I am not fabricating this for any kind of comedic effect or any kind of self-sabotage to my otherwise overtly masculine persona. This is my reality. I am deadly, and I mean deadly, afraid of chickens and turkeys and really any other kind of bird you can think of. The bigger and weirder the bird, the more I am deterred. I kid you not, I have no idea where this fear came from, but it is a version of hell. If you were to say, hey, Philly Goat, what is your most potent, viscerally disturbing version of hell? And I'm going to tell you, basically Jurassic Park with chickens. That is what it is. I don't know where it came from, but I've never really overcome it. And I couldn't even touch a bird right now if you paid me. Honestly, okay, there is a certain amount, perhaps, but like if you were to say, hey Phil, you're gonna be in prison with a bunch of other human males, or we're gonna throw you in prison with a bunch of ostriches. I kid you not, I would probably pick the human males. I'll pick the gangsters and the thugs and the murderers over a pack of ostriches. So weirdo bird faces, they quite often, albeit irregularly and somewhat unpredictably, populate my mental landscape. Bird faces, like they just pop into my head. Bird faces, their beaks and their quick head movements. The fear is real. What do I hope for? Well, we know I'm afraid of birds. So one of my hopes, for sure, is to not be near birds. Now, I like looking at birds. From a distance, they're actually quite pretty and majestic. But I don't want to be near them. And so again, many of our hopes are really just inversions of our deterrence. And many of our deterrents are inversions of our hopes. Right? We hope to maintain our physical health. We're afraid to lose it. We hope to not be near birds. We're afraid of being near birds. Right? So a lot of the times our hopes are really just anti-deterrents, and our deterrents are anti-hopes. So in this ever-evolving inspection of our reward and deterrent circuitry, we have to also parse through them. We have to partition them as best we can so that we can truly crystallize our unique hopes and our unique deterrents. Are there any hopes that you have that cannot be inverted into deterrence? And are there any deterrents that you have that cannot, you finish my sentence, right? That cannot be inverted into hopes? I love my kids, there is a fear within me of something bad happening to my kids. Right? I have people I care about. I'm afraid of bad things happening to those people. And I hope that only good things happen to those people. So even my most cherished hopes can be understood as forms of deterrence. I'm deterred by the idea of the people I love not fully optimizing their living experience. Right? If you're a parent and if you have a child who has been ensnared by addiction, and you bump over a massive speed bump on a country road, and you wreck your car. But in all seriousness, if you're a parent of someone who has been ensnared by addiction, you're afraid that it's going to get worse, but you're also upset by the fact that they're living in a state of squalor. Even if it doesn't get worse, the fact that they are where they are, that's upsetting. So there's a whole God, these bumps are savage. There's a whole level of just ambiguity, right? And we really try to parse out our meaning from all this, right? So we've waded through this maze of mental mirage, right? Peeling back the curtains, peeling back through the language. We cut through the language. We're seeing the sensory motor mental flow for what it is. Reflections and really hamster wheel spin-offs of the engines of our reward and deterrence system. But then we dig into this and we see that our reward system and our deterrence system are oftentimes inversions of one another, such that the system itself is a kind of yin-yang flow. There's no real separation between our hopes and our deterrence. Okay, so then we boil that down. And what are we left with? What crystalline admixture are we left with after we cut through the hall of mirrors that is our reward and deterrent system? You know, part of this mental landscape is, and we haven't really touched on it explicitly here, there's just a feeling. So punctuating our language and like little fish attached to a shark, right? Attaching itself to our language, attaching itself to our sensory motor experiences, attaching itself to our deterrence and our hopes, and ultimately underlying and underpinning the very foundations of these deterrence and hopes is the ever shape-shifting atmosphere of our emotional landscape. We talk about the mental landscape. Well, the mental landscape it's something that is understood in the form of sensory motor expression, but it's ultimately not pinned down to that. Emotion it's a feeling. It's something that it's an imbuing. The same experience peppered with a different emotional context can in one case be a deterrent and in another case be a hope, a reward. So when we cut right to the meaning of our lives, right? The magnetism of our will, what moves us one way and not the other, and then the other way and not the one. Really comes down to autonomic, mostly subconscious emotional feel. And we have to really pry the feeling out of our mental landscape to understand how much of an impact it has on that landscape. So we need to think of things that we implicitly value, obviously things that we explicitly value, but then as part of this reward and deterrence infrastructure, this mental infrastructure, we have to also search for those aspects that we can and can't live without. Right? We gotta go plumbing for those things. They're not always obvious. Like one truth in life, and it's something you don't think about every day, but a lot of my existential foundation rests on certain of my appendages and organs remaining intact. So we can talk about these grandiose hopes and fears of our wider life spectrum, but oftentimes in the here and now, it's basic physiological protection, right? A lot of our feelings depend on just the avoidance of destruction to our physique. So again, I think we get lost as humans in some of these bigger problems in life. Or we get so wrapped up in this humiverse, we disconnect ourselves from the nature of our existence, which, whether we have a kind of soul or spirit, is besides the point. Our existential foundation as we live in these animal bodies is one of an animal reality. My life would be very different if I all of a sudden lost my genitals. Wouldn't lack meaning, but as I've constructed, however involuntarily, the meaning in my life currently, it is implicitly dependent on my genitals remaining intact. It's just an unwritten, unspoken truth. If that changes, we've got problems. So we don't need to think about it, provided we don't actually put those aspects of our physique at risk. But it's certainly something that we can acknowledge, and that this is a truth that is just understood, I think, in many aspects of our physiology, our vision, right? Yes, there are blind people. They have, the visually impaired have moved away from this kind of need, right? They've adapted. But a lot of us who haven't been forced to adapt to an existence without some of these things that we take for granted, we, without a doubt, would have trouble adjusting quickly. And so part of this search for meaning in our lives is really just one of, again, these are not my ideas really, I'm wording them in a kind of paraphrased way that I understand them to be, to make sense. But we have to, I'm not saying detach, you don't have to just detach from all these things, There's a reason why I like my eyes. There's a reason why I need my genitals. There's a reason why I need my legs. But it's a kind of we need to reframe a lot of the things that are very basic to us as gifts to be grateful for, as opposed to things that we need. Yes, we need them, but don't understand it like that. Don't understand it like that. And it goes the same with our social relationships. Don't see your social relationships as needs. Yes, they are needs. But the heuristic that we want to inculcate is one of a kind of grateful reception as opposed to an imperative. Frame your hopes as gratitudes, as things to be grateful for. If they come true, you are grateful. But if they don't come true, well, that's that. That's fine. And we do the same thing with our deterrents, which, as we discussed, they're one and the same. Our deterrents and hopes are oftentimes inversions of one another. So when you learn to separate your sense of simply being from these hopes and deterrents, then the chatter will stop. The chatter will subside, right? To understand the engine, take a boat propeller. If you just looked at a propeller as it moved, would you be able to see the full anatomy of the propeller? No, you've got to turn it off so you can look at it. So it goes with our mind. And in this case, specifically, our deterrents and hopes. We have to turn them off to inspect them. We all undeniably have people that we love and people that we care about. And it's a delicate form of contemplation here, but we don't want to ruminate in a kind of way that has us simulating simulating our loss of their presence in our life. We don't want to ruminate on that. We just want to understand the nature of our attachment. Understand the nature of the attachment. We don't want to over-simulate, to overly obsess over the simulation of a bad thing. But we've got to turn the engine off to look at it. Right? If you love a family member, try to imagine your life without them. And if your immediate response is, oh, that's just too painful, I can't, then you're helpless to that aspect of your existential foundation. And that is something that we should try to get a better hold of, basically. Don't be helpless to your meaning. You have basic foundations of meaning, as we said, just your body remaining intact. And then you have more social aspects to your meaning. And then, of course, you've got esoteric and perhaps mystical aspects to your sense of meaning. And we don't want to be helpless to these things. Right? What gives your life meaning can, at the same time, be both something you need and something you can do without. Right? Flexible meaning. You can say, oh, what about your values and virtues? Well, I'm not talking about intentional behavior. A lot of the things in our lives, we aren't in control of them, right? I'm not in control of my loved ones, but they mean the world to me. I'm in control of my behavior insofar as I understand my behavior and my values and my sense of morality. However I came about it. We're not going to get into that in this little island tour, but a lot of our meaning, it just is, right? It's like we've received a gift. Your loved ones are a gift. And the meaning that they provide to your life is profound and will form ultimately perhaps the very foundation of your hopes and deterrents. But much of their existence you have no control over, right? You have no control over their biophysiology. You have no control over whatever genetic proclivities that they have. So you can't help but just step back and realize that every single minute that you have them in your life is a gift. It's not a need. It's a gift. Your very life is a gift. It's not a need. In the sense that, think of how many pre-people just never came to existential fruition for whatever reason, right? And I'm not even talking about the babies that became zygotes and fetuses and then just didn't make it to term. I'm also just talking about the opportunity cost of pre-humanity, right? The semen and eggs that never met. Just as we have people that we walk by every single day, and with the slightest of different actions, we could have, and for the people in our future, we still could, end up being existentially bound to their well-being, right? Someone that you maybe didn't smile back at when they gave you a creepy cafe steer because they're socially awkward. They didn't necessarily mean to scare you off. They really wanted to be your the father of your children. But you didn't reciprocate for whatever reason. And now a person that could have been created by you and that person will never exist. So there's a meaning there that just didn't happen. See what I'm saying? If you had have ended up with that person, perhaps you would have created a child. Or even if you didn't create a child, you would have just had a relationship with that person that could have become a foundation to your existence. And for whatever the reason, it didn't get reciprocated. Meaning avoided. Right? So there's two ways to look at this. There's no shortage of meaning. It's number one. And really, meaning is fluid. We shouldn't hitch too big of a trailer to the different hopes and deterrents that we have in our lives. Turn off the engine of these hopes and of these deterrents so that you can get a look at them. Not to detach, but to disentangle. And through such disentanglement, you might be able to stop the linguistic chatter.